Anybody know what this place is? This is where they fought the Battle of Gettysburg. 50,000 men died right here on this field, fighting the same fight that we're still fighting amongst ourselves today. This green field right here, painted red, bubbling with the blood of young boys, smoke and hot lead pouring right through their bodies. Listen to their souls, man. Take a lesson from the dead. If we don't come together right now on this hollow ground, we too will be destroyed. I don't care if you like each other or not, but you will respect each other. And maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll learn to play this game like men.
Hello and welcome to another episode of ERG PowerTalk. I'm your host, Joe Santana. That clip is from the movie Remember the Titans, which hit the theaters back in September of 2000. And the clip captures a pivotal moment when Coach Boone, played by Denzel Washington, transforms from this strictly authoritative directive leader that he's been up to that point in the movie into a transformational and inclusive one. And as Boone stands with his players on this historic ground of Gettysburg, he recognizes that what his team really needs isn't more discipline and structure, it's unity. And so this moment is powerful because it captures what all great leaders of their time do, which is that they adapt and they evolve their style to meet the real needs of a particular moment in time. And just like Coach Boone, today's ERG leaders are being called to evolve. They're being called to meet new workplace needs that require far more than ERG leaders who unite people for career support and company PR. It really needs leaders today that can collect and convey the voices of their community to business leaders in their organization, to enable these business leaders to make better decisions. And that is our topic for today. That requires a whole new mindset, a whole new skill set. And so the big question is, how do you make that transformation? But before we introduce our guests, let's take a moment to review our mission and acknowledge our supporters. This is ERG Power Talk, and I'm your host, Joe Santana. The purpose of ERG Power Talk is to provide a virtual forum for the exchange of great ideas and inspiration for ERG leaders as well as others interested in supporting ERGs. With ERG Power Talk, there is no more waiting until the next conference and praying that you get the budget to travel to the conference to find great ideas and stimulation toward action. Just subscribe and listen at your convenience. Before we begin, a quick note of thanks to our supporters: Atrium Health, Freighter Health and Wisconsin Medical College, Hiscox, Lee Health, National Audubon Society, Tapestry, Oshkosh Corporation, UL Solutions, and Sony Pictures Entertainment. Now, let's go straight to the program. She has decades of executive experience across corporate, nonprofit, and entrepreneurial sectors and brings a rare blend of business strategy, spiritual insights, and transformational coaching. Her roles as an executive life coach, pastor, and president of multiple ventures, combined with advanced degrees in finance, divinity, and global leadership, make her uniquely qualified to guide leaders through the evolution of their leadership style. Her work empowers others to adapt with purpose, lead inclusively, and create impact across industries and communities.
My name is Dr. Jolander Headley, and I'm the founder and CEO of Jolander Headley Leadership Development, which is a global empowerment organization. And following my 26 plus years in corporate as an executive on Wall Street, I coach and train C-suite executives and leadership teams to improve communication, implement personal growth and professional development strategies to advance their vision and the mission of their organizations. I am an official TEDx and an international conference speaker, and I'm also the founder of Joe's Academy of Music and the CEO as well of this wonderful academy, which is an arts and cultural organization based in New York City. And this academy was established in 1998. It has served over 10,000 families throughout the boroughs. We've stopped counting. But what makes us very proud about this academy is that it certainly has allowed our students to make their mark in the arts. And as you've previously mentioned, I also serve in the clergy community. I am the executive pastor at Alliance Tabernacle in Brooklyn, and I just love my life.
You love your life, and it's a busy one as well. I'm just enumerating all the different things that you do and wondering, when does this lady sleep? That is a lot of stuff there. Anyway, thank you for joining us today on ERG Power Talk. I really appreciate it. Clearly, you've worked with leaders across a lot of different structures and so forth, the corporate, for-profit, nonprofit, spiritual spaces. And the question is, what have you found are the key signals that it's time for a leader to evolve or change their style?
Thanks for this question, Joseph. This is such a powerful question because leadership isn't static, it's dynamic. And so, whether I'm in that corporate boardroom leading a nonprofit organization or guiding others in this faith based context, I've learned that the most effective leaders are those who are self aware and responsive to change. So when you think about it, a leader should always be growing into being the best version of the leader they were created to be. And it's time to evolve your leadership style. When you grow from being a leader with a position and title to a leader with permission and relationships. And what I mean by this is that a leader with position has influence because of the job title, right? People follow you because they have to. That's why they follow you. But what happens when you're not watching what they're doing? And then you start feeling this tension between how you lead and the outcomes that you're seeing. Now, that's the question, right? So as you evolve from this space of a positional authority leader with a title, and you become that leader with permission, this is purely based on relationships, and people are following you because they want to follow you. You develop influence and trust when people are treated like they're valued. People want to feel like they're valued, right? And you can like people without leading them, but you cannot lead people without liking them. So that's some of the areas that it just sends almost a trigger. If you don't like them, but you're trying to lead them, that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So that shift actually requires humility, emotional intelligence, and a commitment to lifelong learning process. So look, the bottom line is this. If you're not growing, you're limiting the growth of the people that you're called to lead. So evolution isn't optional, it's good stewardship. And these are some of the discussions that I have in my workshops when I facilitate in the leadership development space.
The way that you presented that, I think, really brings it home that leadership is this constantly evolving process that has to do with what's going on around you. And especially when you don't have formal control over a department or a group of people, you really have to get people who see the value in following you. You have to get that permission, as it were. Before the recent backlash, corporations primarily wanted the ERG initiatives that they had in their organization that were led by the leaders who listened to this program to essentially focus on enhancing their public image and fostering an inclusive image within the workplace as well. But today, that's not as important to companies as it used to be. It probably should be still, as we're learning, as all of this is evolving. But there's clearly a need to have a deeper understanding of what these various communities that make up the workforce of the organization and reflect also the marketplace are all about. So given this need, it appears the corporations now need their ERG leaders to serve as more of a strategic connector or insight gatherers who help leadership better understand and respond to the needs of the diverse workforce and marketplace they serve. So based on this, what leadership skills do you think are critical now that may not have been as critical in the past? What are some of the new leadership skills that these group leaders now need?
This is such an important question because in today's world, let me say it like this: performative diversity is no longer enough. People are demanding real inclusion. And I've experienced this firsthand at Joe's Academy of Music, where through serving diverse and often marginalized communities, I quickly realized that this traditional leadership, it just won't work. So one of the things I did was I created opportunities for quarterly recitals, but also listening sessions with students, families, and staff. And I got to hear their voices and I got to learn from them. That was important. See, these weren't just check-ins, but they revealed some hidden challenges and some powerful stories that we needed to hear so a shift in our organization can take place with effect. And so, in fact, one of the stories that I heard led us to launching a scholarship opportunity for undocumented youth through our nonprofit organization. And this is something we hadn't considered until someone shared their truth, someone shared their story, and we listened. And that student experience had taught me something very significant. It taught me that inclusion isn't a program. It's a mindset. And so you see, leadership used to be about this authority and strategy and results. And yes, that's still important today, very important today. But today's leaders need more. Today's leaders need empathy, cultural intelligence, and the ability to connect with people. See, vision and strategy are vital. We know that they are. But without cultural awareness, and leadership just falls flat because then it just becomes mere management. And so I can't emphasize enough that modern leadership requires listening deeply, creating psychological safety, and being open to the uncomfortable truths, because you're going to hear some things that really would make you uncomfortable, but you need to be prepared for that. And when you lead from a space of humanity, you don't just get results, you inspire purpose. And so leaders must go beyond all of this data collection that we know to be the normative, because we need more. We need to understand people's real experiences.
That's really valuable because, as you said, the data collection is more of looking at this big data from far away, whereas what you're talking about, I think, has been referred to as thick data, which is where you really get into understanding what's the thinking behind those numbers that you're seeing. Why do people respond that way? How do they feel about things? How do they think? And I think for ERG leaders, everything that you said applies to them as well, because their mindset has been one of top down. They put a plan together and then they say, let's have this event and let's do this other thing. And now it's more of going back to their groups and their members and finding out, hey, what are you experiencing? What do you like? What do you not like? How do these policies that we have in the company in general, how do they support you? And not assuming that because we share a demographic identity that your response is going to be the same as mine either, but actually listening to you and then taking that information and being then the funnel that takes that information, pulls it all together, and then goes to senior leadership because they need that information so that they're not flying blind, so that they understand, hey, this is what the women's community thinks. This is what the LGBTQ community thinks. And I think that requires a mindset shift. And I think you touched on it already. In order to be able to do that, to be able to move from that former role of running a program to support the members, to leveraging the members to understand their needs and to then become the funnel that takes those voices and brings it up to senior leadership. And I think you have to be more of an influencer in order to be able to do that. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think we're talking about people who are informal leaders of these groups who now have to go to formal leadership, who obviously has more power within the organization than they do. They certainly can't make them do anything. But in order to be of value to their members, they have to be able to bring that voice and be able to influence. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because I think that's a whole different mindset and skill set.
As a matter of fact, John Maxwell says leadership is influence. So, nothing more, nothing less. But to move into more strategic and influential roles, ERG leaders must truly first shift their mindset. The mindset shift is just necessary. So ERG leaders today must see themselves not just as advocates, but as strategic business partners. See, this means shifting how you think and operate. And I've had to make some major shifts in my own leadership. And I've seen how powerful these shifts have become. I'll share with you some of them. One is from advocacy to alignment. Because I remember when I first started leading a diversity initiative, my focus was on raising awareness and pushing for change. But then I quickly realized that to truly make an impact, I had to link our goals to the organization's bigger picture. And for example, at the Academy, we began connecting our cultural programs to student retention and parent engagement. And suddenly, what started as an advocacy effort became a measurable business strategy. And that was key because that got us more buy-in from our leadership and our stakeholders because they could now see results. And so the second thing I had to shift was planning events, and you alluded to it earlier, where the ERG leaders were known for seeing as the people who plan the events, but planning the events to driving outcomes. So let's be honest. Yes, for a long time, ERGs have been seen as event organizers. And yes, celebrations and heritage months and all these wonderful things matters. But we've got to go deeper. We have to go deeper intentionally. So I once worked with a team that analyzed our Black History Month events. And what I did was I used that data to recommend mentorship programs that were applicable and will create impact for the community. And I also revised our hiring practices. Now, that's the difference. The difference is moving from a calendar of events to a cycle of impact. This is a big difference, right? And I live this out in every space that I serve, every space that I believe that I'm called to impact others' lives. I live it out. For example, in my role as the executive pastor, before any event is approved on our church's calendar, we are very intentional about what that looks like from an impact perspective in the communities and what's our expected outcomes. So we ask ourselves these questions before we move forward. And then the final thing that I want to share with you on this shift in mindset would be moving from a siloed to a cross-functional thinking. Because one of the biggest growth moments for me was learning to speak the language of other departments. Because so often you're stuck in one space and one thinking, and that's the language. But when you begin to start having these regular check-ins, say with HR, finance, or even IT and marketing, whatever it is that you don't normally assign to you per se as the ERG leader, it changes everything. See, I remember when we proposed this new scholarship fund for the Academy, our alignment with our finance team helped us to structure it in a sustainable way, because at the end of the day, it's about sustainability as well. So you see, ERG leaders, you gain influence when we move from this isolated silo effort to one that is integrated with strategy. So the bottom line is this. ERG leadership, I believe, isn't just about culture, but it's about contribution. So when we connect our inclusion to innovation, retention, growth, we become key drivers of the organization's success, not just its structure, but also its success.
As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, again, you enumerated some of them, but I would love for you to continue giving us more of these skills. I heard you have to have some business acumen. You have to understand how your organization operates and is structured. You have to develop skills and partnering and working with other people. And I'm going to stop there and let you keep going.
Yeah, I think like the main thing, if I were to bring it all together, because comes under the auspices of, I would say, alignment. If I were to just summarize it all, because you could list a whole bunch of skill sets, but if there isn't alignment with the goals of the organization's bigger picture, then everything else really doesn't matter much. Because if you're pushing one agenda and then the organization's, your goals are different, doesn't align with the bigger picture, then you're not going to get buy-in. So if I were to give just that big tip in that would summarize and bring it all together, having those measurable business strategies is so critical to getting the buy-in from the stakeholders, and you need to have that alignment. There is a need to develop the skills to speak the language of business. And so this means building out this toolkit that would include data fluency, strategic communication, and organizational awareness. Let me just share 5 things that comes to mind, or maybe 5 skill sets, if you will. I mentioned before the data literacy. I mean, leaders must be able to collect data, interpret and present it in a way that it connects the initiatives to the business outcomes. So like retention, engagement, innovation, and overall market insights. Because if you can't quantify the impact, it's harder to secure executive buy-in. The next thing I think of, and I spoke to it a little bit before, was the business acumen. It has to be really about business. So it's essential to understand your organization's priorities, the goals, and the KPIs. If you don't understand it, you need to learn it. You need to develop that skill set. So ERG leaders should know how to position their work in a way that it contributes to the bottom line. Because if you're just doing what you're doing, and at the end of the day, you can't present it in a way that it contributes to the bottom line, this is not just about brand image. It's way more than brand image. And I think influential storytelling, because we know that numbers alone doesn't move people. Stories do. So when you have the real stories of the outcomes and so forth, that's really what moves people. And so I remember having an autistic student who performed flawlessly on Carnegie Hall stage. And this part of our story, it led to even further development of our expected outcomes. See, I have learned how to master the art of translating our matrix into meaningful narratives that would drive the decisions so that stakeholders and leaderships and strategic partners would be inspired to support. And which leads me to the other skill that I think it's really meaningful for the ERG leader is that cross-functional collaboration. So because as leaders, sometimes we tend to operate in that vacuum. And I referred to it a little bit earlier as a silo. But leaders must partner with, whether it's your HR, your marketing, your operations, DEI, or just all those teams, to infuse that inclusive practice across the organization. And that means learning how to navigate influence without authority. Because remember, I said earlier, if you just have that positional authority and you have that title, but you cannot influence change, then it's useless. And so last thing I can think about with skill sets would be that change management, because as organizations evolve, we ought to evolve as leaders, but the truth is organizations evolve as well. And that means ERG leaders must be skilled at guiding their communities and their companies through all of the cultural shifts that's taking place, because ensuring that alignment is key to sustainability. I have seen in my own journey where leading, whether it was corporate setting or building a cultural organization, I've learned that my impact deepens when my insight is directly tied to strategy. And so I was no longer building out community, but I started building capacity for innovation, equity, and long-term growth in the organizations that I belong. So I believe now is the time. Now is the time for ERG leaders to stop asking for a seat at the table and start showing up as the decision maker that you are, prepared, informed, and equipped to lead the organization forward.
Okay, so here's what I got from the first half of my discussion with Jolander. 1, to lead an effective 21st century ERG, you must be seen as a trusted leader by your community and key stakeholders. That trust is earned through real relationships, and it's essential because, as we've established before, one of your greatest values is in providing senior leadership with insight into the needs and potential of your community. So you need to secure the trust of your community as well as business leadership. 2, to gain trust with community leaders today, ERG leaders must create safe spaces where their members feel not just heard, but understood, so that they will open up and share their true perspectives on the workplace and marketplace. Getting others to join you in driving inclusive transformation begins when people feel seen and valued by you and safe enough to share what they really think and feel. 3, it's also important for you to develop the empathy to hear more than what is said, to listen with empathy. We don't just listen to words, we listen for what's beneath them. We pay attention to tone, body language, pauses, and energy shifts. We notice when something feels off or when someone holds back. These subtle signals often reveal unspoken concerns or emotions. By staying present and curious, you'll better understand what your community members need, even when they don't say it out loud. 4, this does not mean we stop doing surveys or polls to gather information and data. On the contrary, these continue to be important. But what it does mean is that we add more individual and group listening to these data collection steps so that we can move from just data gathering to deeper insight. Surveys offer trends that can point you to areas of need, but the most valuable information comes from thick data, personal stories, and lived experiences that reveal what survey response percentages cannot. And finally, 5, once you gather these insights, you should channel the collective voice of your community to senior leadership through whatever formal channels exist in your organization, such as your executive sponsor or someone from the Office of Inclusion. This enables this information to influence smarter, more inclusive business decisions that more fully support the best performance and opportunities for your community members. Up next, we'll explore how today's top 21st century ERG leaders can continue to increase their ability, their credibility, their influence, and their strategic impact. All this and more when we come back, but first this. I'll see you on the other side. Are you an ERG group or committee chair struggling to balance your ERG activities with your day job responsibilities? Well, you're not alone. There are hundreds of thousands of passionate ERG leads all around the world that find themselves in the same boat. The only solution found by many is to give up lunch hours and personal time with family and friends. But there is a better way, and that better way is to master the powerful skills that enable you to 1. Set realistic and achievable compelling goals and priorities. 2. Distribute the workload by effectively delegating tasks and responsibilities to others. 3. Communicate in a way that increases your impact with less time and effort on your part. 4, secure the full and active support of executive sponsors and other senior business leaders. And 5, fit your ERG leadership work into a reasonable set of time boundaries. And that and more is exactly what tens of thousands of your colleagues have learned to do effortlessly by participating in Supercharge Workshops. Supercharge Workshops was developed by us along the same easy and powerful how-to framework found in our popular Supercharge Your ERGs book. The modular, customizable programs are loaded with fun exercises and tools that will immediately give you back hours of time each day while increasing your ability to achieve high impact and measurable results in both your ERG work and your job. For more details on how you can schedule a Supercharge Workshop session in your organization, go to superchargeworkshops.com. That's https:// Supercharge Workshops, one word with no spaces.com. So don't suffer silently. Take that first step towards stopping your struggle today. Check out Supercharge Workshops. So, how can ERG leaders develop what I think is one of the ingredients that's really important besides skills and everything else in order to be able to bring power and credibility to the unfiltered voices of their communities? And that element is courage. I think, again, this is something where somebody who's never had a formal leadership position, but maybe has a lot of passion and now they're leading an ERG, maybe they're not comfortable in these particular arenas. What are some of the things that you recommend that they do in order to build that courage muscle up so that they become more effective in this new, more high power, more visible role that's available to them?
Yeah, that's an important question that's near and dear to my heart. But let's talk about courage first. Now, courage isn't about being loud. I think that's one of the misconceptions. Sometimes people would associate having courage to being this loud, and that's not quite true. Courage isn't about being loud. It's about being clear. It's about, because it comes from really knowing why your ERG exists. It comes from knowing who you're standing for and what's at stake if their voices aren't heard. So sometimes it starts with a small practice. It might not be in a space where it's in a boardroom, but it starts with taking like baby steps, right? But courage is what allows us to stay in the game and really to say the hard things in a way that it invites solutions and not just reactions. For me, honestly, courage is developed in resilience. It's developed out of just knowing my core values and understanding them and leaning into them. And because those are your non-negotiables, right? So when you stand up for your core values, you are developing courage. And when you take action, you are developing courage. But we also need to talk about credibility, because that's built through preparation and consistency. And it's not just about how people feel, and it's about backing it up with real data that people can understand and see that this was thoughtfully recommended. For example, if I say our members or our students, they feel left out, and we just leave it at that, I think it's more powerful when it's rephrased to say something like 68% of our members, 68% of our students say that they don't feel connected to career growth or development or whatever it is they don't feel connected to, right? And so you don't only leave it there, but then you continue to lead on with saying, and here's what we can do about it. So you're coming in with some level of solution. And finally, I think ERG leaders, they need to learn executive fluency, and what I mean by this is the ability to connect cultural insights to business outcomes, because executives are listening and they listen differently. So when you can show how your ERG's insight impact retention, innovation, and even risk management, then you're no longer just advocating, you're influencing. And I see this again in my own journey. Whether it was nonprofit world, whether it was the arts or leading, coaching, or in the faith-based context, I've seen where ERG leaders lead with both heart and strategy. Because when you lead with both heart and strategy, you're not just making noise, but you're creating and implementing change to an organization.
So, what are some tools that ERG leaders can use to help them in this new role? What are some things that are out there that maybe they could start using that'll help them to be more effective in this new role?
So I would recommend, if you're looking for data analytics platforms, you want to look at maybe Qualtrics, Glint, even HR dashboards where the ERG leader can capture these measurable insights for your communities. Because if you cannot capture the data, it goes voiceless, because data gives voice to the stories that we already know, but it helps the decision-making process in the boardroom. So some data analytics platform, I think, would be very helpful. Project management tools that would help to organize events and manage partnerships, track progress and goals, etc. Like Asana, tools like Asana, Monday.com, because the professionalism that you bring in the execution, that builds that level of credibility that's needed as the ERG leader. And then, of course, communication platforms like Slack, Microsoft Teams, because you get an opportunity to broadcast value that you are creating. You get an opportunity to not just provide updates, but also to broadcast the value that you're contributing to the organization. And then there's the presentation skills or tools of Canva or PowerPoint. There's another one, Beautiful AI. It's just the idea of having the visual behind what you're saying, right? So you're not just sharing data, but you're showing the story that lives behind it with the visuals. That's really important, because the ERG's voice is more compelling and it's more executive ready when you can show what you're talking about. And then I think one other tool I would recommend would be a learning and development platform. That would be one like the LinkedIn Learning, or even internal leadership development programs, if that doesn't already exist in the organization. Because these are some of the topics that when I do training in my leadership development programs, I talk about these same things that we're discussing here today: inclusive leadership, business strategies, communicate and connect. And so the leadership development space is critical. But at the end of the day, I think the most powerful tool is a strategy mindset. Because you can have the platforms, but if you don't merge the mindset and bring action towards the mindset, then those platforms will just stay there, be unused, and be pretty much a waste. So we know that the ERG leaders, they aren't just creating community, they're driving culture. And you need these tools to reflect the level of influence and impact you're making in the organization.
As you're talking about this, I kept thinking, all you have to do is say also a CRM tool, and you're talking almost about building a mini company, right?
Correct.
So it's essentially run your operation or run your group as if you're running a mini company. And with the right vehicle and the right mindset, you can accomplish a lot. And just think of the experience that person's going to get in terms of even how to be a formal leader later on, maybe in another department or a group, because they've learned how to pull together this group and formalize and structure it. So I kept thinking, it's almost like building a mini company. You blend spiritual insight with business acumen, which I think is a really powerful thing. How can that kind of holistic approach benefit ERG leaders working in these high-pressure corporate settings?
That's so near and dear to me. But I want to be clear about this, because blending spiritual insight with business acumen isn't about bringing religion into the workplace. It's not about that at all. In fact, it's about bringing wholeness into leadership. And like you mentioned, in a high pressured corporate environment, ERG leaders are often carrying these emotional baggage, these emotional weights of their families, their communities, and of course, the expectations of their executives, right? So you're carrying all of this. And when you're not grounded, that's what leads to burnout and self-doubt. Spiritual insight offers something I think data just simply can't. It offers the clarity, the conviction, and that internal alignment. See, aligning with the corporate goals, that's one thing, but you as the leader need that internal alignment. That's what spiritual insight does. It anchors you in the purpose that you believe that you're called to do. And it anchors you in that purpose with all of the politics and the loud noise. It just keeps you steady. It helps you to lead from a space of values, a space for your core values and even empathy, and not just about matrix. Right? And it cultivates that empathy, resilience, the emotional intelligence that's needed to hold space for others, even when you're under pressure yourself. Because at the same time, business acumen, it ensures that you impact strategy, right? All those strategic things and the measurable things, and it aligns with goals. But it just does not give you that space where you can necessarily see people. But when you merge both together, the spirituality and the business acumen, you become the leader who can see people and the leader that can move performance forward. So, like you alluded to, it is a rare and very powerful combination. And so, in my journey, I've learned and I've grown into this. I wasn't always this way, but I learned to grow into it, that I needed a holistic approach. And that's what really helped me to stand in rooms where I didn't look like the majority. But I spoke with authority because I was grounded and I wasn't performing either. I was truly anchored in something that was deeper than that moment in that boardroom or deeper than that moment in whatever space that I was. And so I also realized that it didn't just give me what I needed, but it also gave others the permission to lead from their authenticity too. So it wasn't just about me, it was also about others. And so ERG leaders who embrace this blend, I think you'll find that you're just not just creating change, but you are also creating a framework that is sustainable in whatever you're creating.
As I'm listening to you, this sounds actually really exciting. It sounds like a really exciting journey. It's not about just acquiring new skills, getting new tools. It's literally about building a more centered, stronger self, a better version of you, uniquely you, but a better version of you by understanding all these other little internal forces that also play a role in making you effective. So if an ERG leader is listening to this and they feel, hey, I'm stuck in the old model, this all sounds great, I'd love to do it. What's the first step that you recommend they take to begin that transformation, to begin that movement into becoming that new type of leader?
The first thing I would say to that person is that you're not alone. I was there too. I was stuck at one point. But when you feel you're stuck, you've got to ask yourself a couple of questions. You've got to ask, well, what do I know now that I didn't know before that was possible? Right? And you really have to start thinking in a reflective way, because now you're asking yourself, what do I do? But what do I know now that I didn't know before? So I start reflecting and I ask myself questions like, what am I really trying to shift? What am I really trying to change? Because you at least got to know or have an idea of what you feel needs to be changed. And then you want to ask yourself a question like, what does my community and my company need that no one else is naming out loud? Because we're all created to solve a problem, right? So if you begin to ask yourself that question, one of the problems that you're solving is something that no one else had the courage to even name out loud. So the level of clarity unlocks purpose, and purpose unlocks strategy. So the next thing I would recommend is definitely to take an inventory by using my help framework. And my help framework is designed in a way that's very holistic, a healthy leader perspective, where you start off with the H being healing. You ask yourself, are there internal doubts and frustrations that I need to name and I need to release? The transformation starts from within. Then I move to the E pillar, where is equipping. What knowledge or skills would help you to elevate your voice in executive spaces? Start learning the language, and I spoke about that a little bit before. Start learning the language of strategy. Start learning the language that you need to learn. And then the L, the leadership pillar. Are you showing up as a connector, or are you just shrinking back your influence? See, leadership is about leaning in even when it's uncomfortable. So it might not be, but you need that resilience. You need that courage. You need to develop those areas. And that comes with the leadership pillar. And then the P would be the purpose and plan. Define that bold next step. After you've asked yourself those questions that precede, you define the next bold step that you need to take. And maybe it's meeting with HR. Maybe it's launching a feedback survey, or maybe it's drafting that proposal that links to the goals that you have and the business matrix that's connected to those goals. See, transformation doesn't just happen in one leap. It happens with one aligned step. I'm going to say that again, because transformation does not just happen when you take one leap. It happens when it's one aligned step. And so ERG leaders begin to see when ERG leaders begin to see themselves as not just the advocate in the situation, but you're building out something. You're the architect of that culture. And that's when everything begins to shift.
So what resources do you recommend for those who want to take that deeper dive? Where can they go to get, let's say, for example, access to that model that you just spoke about and other resources that they can utilize?
My help framework is found on Amazon. It's a workbook that's found on Amazon. And I can share the link with you. So that's definitely one of the resources. The other resource I would strongly recommend would be seek out sponsors, seek out mentors, seek out a community where there maybe are ERG roundtables, so that you're leaning into community where strategy becomes a mastermind and you're sharing off of each other. That's very helpful. We talked about before with the LinkedIn learning platform and so forth. Those are areas, even John Maxwell leadership trainings. Those are great. That's a great platform to grow in influence and not just positional authority, but to grow in influence. And then, of course, books like Dare to Lead by Brené Brown for that courage and that vulnerability of high-stake leadership. And there are other books like, recommend another, maybe The Art of Gathering by Prior Parker. And that book in particular helps you to understand how to shift when you create meaningful ERG moments. Inclusify, I throw another one in there. Inclusify by Stephanie K. Johnson is another. And that helps to linking the diversity to business performance, which I think is a critical part of the conversation today. At the end of the day, sustainable impact, it comes from the inside out. And so if we can begin to do this deep work as a leader, then impact on the outside is definitely sustainable.
So how can our listeners reach you directly?
Thank you for asking. I'd love to stay connected with our listeners. To find me online, my website is www.jolanderheadley.com. And you can learn more about even my leadership programs there, speaking engagements, my framework, etc. It's all there. I'm also on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can also email me directly at info@jolanderheadley.com. But whether you're an ERG leader, listening, executive, or someone just passionate about purpose-driven leadership, I'd love, and I'll be honored to connect with you and support you in that journey from the inside out.
Thanks again for joining us today on ERG Power Talk. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, here is what I got from the second half of our discussion with Jolander. 1. Running a community that provides honest, valuable insights to help your organization make better workforce and marketplace decisions requires courageous leadership. And that courage shows up in the form of clear communication of those insights. 2, to convey your findings and insights in this powerful and courageous way, always use stories backed by data that end with offering a solution. For example, instead of saying to your executive sponsor or Office of Inclusion liaison, Many of our members feel disconnected from career growth. Say, 68% of our members feel disconnected from career growth, and here's why and how we can fix it. Using stories backed by data and ending with a solution in this manner makes your message more emotionally relatable, more powerful, and more actionable, increasing the likelihood of your listeners taking action, resulting in meaningful change. 3. For the greatest impact, always connect your recommendations to executive priorities like revenue growth, cost reduction, retention, innovation, operational efficiency improvements, and risk reduction. That's how you shift from having yourself and your group being seen as only an employee support group to being seen as a business strategy resource. 4, also remember that many observers also judge the credibility of a leader and their group by how smooth their operation runs. To that end, operate your ERG like a well-run business unit, using platforms and tools like Asana, Glint, Slack, and Canva, and others to run your projects that gather insights and communicate them professionally. Not only will this structure inspire more credibility, it'll also make your life a bit easier. And finally, 5. Remember, the effectiveness of a community is ultimately shaped by you, the leader. As the leader, you set the community's tone and direction, and you represent that community with senior leadership. By committing yourself to personal and professional growth, you'll continuously increase your ability to guide and represent your community in a way that makes it even more valuable as a resource for members and your organization. Many ERG leaders today listening to this discussion may feel overwhelmed by the increasing expectation placed on them to not only support their communities in the traditional ways that they've always supported them, but also to help drive strategic business outcomes in the midst of all this turbulence in a rapidly evolving workplace. And perhaps you feel that you're not the right person. You don't have the success track record needed to fill such a big role. And you might question whether you're capable of stepping into such a leadership position that demands so much. But you might be surprised to learn how many people who you think of as great leaders started out facing big obstacles and personal doubts. For example, take this leader. Throughout his life, he faced near constant personal and professional setbacks that deeply challenged his spirit. He lost his first political race. He suffered many bitter defeats throughout his life, and he endured the death of a beloved son. His early career was marked by repeated professional failures, each one compounding his struggles with his mental depression and self-doubt. Yet, despite these hardships, he rose to become a leader at a time of most critical challenge for his nation. In the face of his own tremendous losses and unimaginable pressure, he rose to lead with remarkable empathy, striving to heal divisions while adhering to a moral vision of unity and empathy. His humility allowed him to acknowledge his own imperfections and to learn from his mistakes, while his clarity of purpose kept the nation focused on the ideals of liberty and equality. His ability to persevere under such personal and national weight ultimately secured his place as one of the most revered leaders in American history. And that leader was Abraham Lincoln. As ERG leaders, you may face your own tough challenges and setbacks, but remember that like Abraham Lincoln, many great leaders of the past and present rose through these challenges and personal doubts by having resilience and purpose. So lead with empathy, lead with clarity, lead with vision, and embrace these challenges as fuel for personal growth and keep moving forward to shape a stronger, more inclusive, and more successful future for your community and your organization. Thank you for tuning in to ERG Power Talk. If you enjoyed and got value out of this program, please like us and leave a favorable review at your podcast provider's site. Also, invite others to listen to the show. By the way, contact me if you're looking for an ERG Symposium keynote or a leader for your strategy workshop, new chair onboarding, and or ERG bootcamp. I can run these for you either in person or in a virtual setting. Also, for more great ideas and tips for your ERGs, get my books, Supercharge your ERG's 18 tips to power up your ERG/BRG strategy and the new DEI and ERG frontier, how you and your efforts can rise and thrive in the new world of constant disruption. Both available on Amazon.com. I'm Joe Santana. Thanks again for tuning in.